Shalom and good day all. This is Tequila29 back again, this time for, well, an anime movie collection review. And of course, you would have seen on the thumbnail that the collection that I'll be covering is the Makato Shinkai collection. And also on that thumbnail has got a bit of a elephant in the room, because I really think a certain film needed to be added to this. And I'll go on to covering the films. Now, with the films already, I have already reviewed on the Rainbow Press and Comics website the review for Weathering with You and also Your Name. And I must admit, I really did enjoy both of those films, because Weathering with You, for myself, was actually one of the first Makato Shinkai films that I actually saw in cinema. Now, as I go through these list of Makato Shinkai movies, I'll try to give a quick synopsis using, of course, the box, or the DVD, or the Blu-ray, as well as what I enjoyed and liked about the movie. So I'm going to start off with the first one that actually shows on the list here, and it's Voices of a Distant Star. Now, that's also shown on, it's also included on the first in the Makato Shinkai Classics, and in it we've also got another movie which is a little bit longer than Voices of a Distant Star, and it's called 5 centimeters per second, and it sort of focuses on how two specific characters, and I'll give you the synopsis quite away. Tono Tanaki and Shinohara Akari were close friends, but gradually grew further and further apart. As time moves on, though separated, they continue to exchange in contact in the form of letters. In other words, old-fashioned email. To those who aren't familiar with it. So, and of course, letters still do get sent that way in this time period. Yet, as time continues to trudge on, their contact with one another begins to cease, and Takaki wonders if he'd be given a chance to meet Akari again. Now, one nice little thing about this story with 5 centimeters per second is that together, when the characters are a little bit younger, you do learn that they sort of like go to a location which also has a tree, and this tree, the setup for it, sort of like at the beginning of the story as well as towards the end of the story, plays an important part, because that is the place where they sort of like come back and reunite. I really enjoyed the animation. But not only that, I also enjoyed some of the side stories that happen too, because you actually get to meet some of the characters whom the characters know, and then you move forward practically into, okay, these characters start to grow older, and eventually they do grow apart, as shared in the synopsis. The soundtrack is quite nice for it, which I'd probably give a 7.5 out of 10 for. The characters and the supporting characters a 7.5 out of 10. And for the overall story, a 7.5 out of 10. Now, moving into Voices of a Distant Star, which also stars on this particular Blu-ray. Have you ever watched a movie, whether it be on TV, and not realize who actually made the story? Well, this was one of those experiences with me in regards to this story, Voices of a Distant Star. And again, it does deal with the topic of communication, but it deals with two particular characters, one male, one female. And in the story, one of those characters get called to sort of like serve the Earth by being sent into space to protect the Earth basically from a space invasion. The character that gets sent off is actually the female character, or what would be seen as the acquaintance to the character who is receiving the messages. And in this time, you do actually see that a number of these messages take a bit of time to be delivered to the person who's receiving them on Earth. And it was really nice to watch this movie again, because I never knew that Makato Shinkai had actually produced this movie. Because when I first watched this movie ages ago, and of course it was on free-to-air TV at the time when I did see it, I really enjoyed the plot and the process. And you had to see how one character, in some cases, he could be waiting, for example, days, if not months, and close to years to receiving a message from one of his best friends, who was a female that was also sent into space. And you do actually get to see some of the things that did actually happen in space. There's not really a lot of fighting that happens there, but you do actually hear of that there was some sense of fighting there. So no real visual concept of fighting. So for the story overall, I give it a 7 out of 10. The characters, about a 7 out of 10. The soundtrack, I really like the soundtrack. Again, 7 out of 10. So I'll now move on to the next one. And the next film is called The Promise Placed in Our Early Days. Now, one thing with this is that this also experiments with a little bit more of what happened beforehand. Again, set around somewhat different character, but in this, it has a little bit more happening. For as long as the movie goes for, this is what it says about it. Set in an alternate universe, Japan has divided since World War II. To the north, Hokkaido has been annexed by the Union, and while Honshu and the southern islands is under the US sovereignty. A gigantic, mysterious tower has risen in the north, easily viewed across the Tsugaru Strait from Aomori, the northernmost prefecture of Honshu. In the summer of 1996, three ninth graders have made a promise that on the day that they'll build an aircraft and unravel the tower's mystery. But their project is abandoned after a girl. Now, this girl is actually important because this girl, who is by the name of Sayuri, began experiencing sleeping sickness and is transferred to Tokyo for better treatment. 3 years after Hiraki or Hiraki, has accidentally found out that Sayuri has been in a coma since that time, they practically develop a plan to go and help their friend. Uh, what the friends don't know is that Sayuri's unconscious is also linked to the secrets of the tower and the world. So we start to learn that the character of Sayuri in this does in somewhat dream of multiple different universes, and this is like the story that sets things up for the Makato Shinkai universe to have its own form of multiverse and alternate realities. And this story, for as long as it goes for, 90 minutes long in length, at the beginning, the story does seem to focus on Sayuri's character, but it also works with their interactions with the other key characters. So the three main characters who are making the aircraft, and they really are wanting to explore, find out what's happening with this tower, and when learning upon that, okay, their friend has been taken to this tower, they they're basically on the search for truth, like literally on the search for truth, to find out what's happening, how it connects or is affecting the world. And as they finally do end up getting the aircraft up, end up um, taking flight, they have to practically develop a way to, number one, get their friend back, somehow take him with them and get this person out of a coma. And of course, you can see in the story that it takes time and effort to do these things. And I think with how the story went about it was quite good. So for the story rating, I'm going to give it a 7.5 out of 10. For the soundtrack that was in it, a 7.5 out of 10. And also, oh, hold on a moment, I'm forgetting something. And for the characters as well as the supporting characters, I give a 7.5 out of 10. Now, the next one is called The Children Who Chase After Lost Voices. Now, I really enjoyed this story and what it offered, as it really went into the area of adventure. And one of the things that sort of actually helps this out is one of the main characters' cats, for example. And I will address the elephant in the room as soon as I finish going through the reviews. And I also want to give a review for She and Her Cat. So, jumping in the synopsis for it. When she hears a strange song from a crystal radio, so Asuna tunes into more than just a magical stream of music. Soon she is transported to a mysterious world. So this, in essence, this particular story sort of connects with frequency as well as other things as well. And beasts that roam and brave warriors to fight for their lives. Agatha is a land of breathtaking beauty and unimaginable danger. A place it is believed even the dead can be brought back to life, but at what cost? Now, this story, my goodness, the animation, the idea of it, the plot was incredible. I love what this story offered on the table, because you do learn that this female character who practically becomes the main character of the story. Um, yes, they've got a bit of a love for radio and also wanting to learn about other things outside of their own home life. She's also got a pet cat, which you also learn of, and this pet cat also somewhat helps her find and come across a person, and this person also leads to them finding sort of like um, their sibling or their brother. Which then brings us to the character going into a cave, and as they go into a cave, they soon realize that this is no ordinary cave, and it opens them up into a new world. And in its own way, it's almost like an isekai, but it's not, because you still see that the land that she goes to is still somewhat connected to the earth that she is in. Again, another somewhat explanation of sort of like an alternative reality or a multiverse. And as she goes in, someone else seems to follow with her, and they begin to make their way to some said areas. But eventually, things do happen. There are consequences in the story, but not only are there consequences in the story, there are also good things that happen in the story too. Such as they get to see some areas which, in some essence, can involve like a lot of climbing, and I mean a lot of climbing, and if not careful, a lot of falling. In the experience of this world, you get to see like some of the things that this world has, including machines, to a number of sentient beings that you also encounter, as well as other human beings. One thing I really enjoyed about Children Who Chase After Lost Voices was actually the adventure side of things, and that really stood out to me. So, for the main characters, I'll give a 7 out of 10. Supporting characters, 7.5 out of 10, because they at times they did actually come off a little bit more interesting than the main character. Um, the animation, pretty much for the previous ones, as well as this one, a 7.5 out of 10. So I really enjoyed it. And the story itself, a 7.5 out of 10. Jumping into the next one, The Garden of Words. And one of the things it says, lost in life, found in love. So jumping into synopsis of this. When Takeo, a young high school student who dreams of becoming a shoe designer, decides to skip school one day in favor of sketching in a rainy garden, he has no idea how much his life will change. And when he encounters Yukino, older but perhaps not so much wiser, she seems to admit in the world, despite the difference in their ages, they strike up an unusual relationship, and that unexpectedly continues and evolves with random meetings in the garden on each rainy day. But the rainy season is coming to a close, and there are so many things still left unsaid and undone between them, and thereby time left for Takeo to put his feelings into actions and words between the raindrops and the calms of the storm and what will blossom. Now, this story somewhat revolves sort of like a romantic type story, but there's a little bit more to that because you do learn that each of these characters, yes, the main character which you do meet, which is the high school student, does actually want to design shoes, and you actually get to see some of those pictures shown in the story. And with it, it really opens one up, or opens the person up to, okay, does it really hurt to say hello to a stranger? And in this, it shows, okay, not really, because there are some strangers out there who you don't know what they're experiencing in life. And one of the things that you sort of learn about the person that Takeo meets is that they were thinking of some essence giving up their job and maybe leading to thoughts of suicide. And it's sort of like that event that sort of becomes a new beginning for that character. Not just for Takeo, but also for the other person, Yukino. And what happens there is, like, when they meet there, it's sort of like the place where they meet up in the garden is somewhat like a sanctuary for these two characters. And I really like how that was actually brought across in the story. Another good thing too is that in his relationship with this character, he of course gets permission to sort of like use her foot to get permission so that he's able to sort of like make his shoes. And I believe that he wants to make a majority of his shoes for women more so than men, and that's fine, that's great. And towards the end of the story, you do actually get to see where his shoemaking talent really pays off. Yes, she does get the item. And of course, it's really nice. I'm going to keep this one short. Overall, for characters, supporting characters, animation, and story, a 7 out of 10. Moving on to the last two, and that is Your Name and Weathering With You. Now, both of these I've already covered, not necessarily on the channel, but I want to say a big thanks to Makato Shinkai for Weathering With You to going in the cinemas here in Australia, as I really enjoyed watching one of your movies for the very first time in cinema. Now, with the box set, this is not the actual place where I got the box set, but I'm using it as an example to show what's in the box set of what you're seeing in the shared page. And Weathering With You, I ended up watching before Your Name. So if it's one thing that both of these films really delve into, is how their themes are set. And these are absolutely incredible, because you see in the themes that how a number of these themes can, yes, in some essence, revolve around not just supporting characters, but also spiritual themes. And I really like how that is actually introduced in the story. It's also balanced as well in regards to sort of like those who do believe in it, as well as those who don't believe in it. And I think that's something that makes the storytelling so much more wholesome, because it shows both sides in regards to said stories. With Your Name, for example, you do get to see something of somewhat a Japanese ritual. With Your Name, it's completely something different, but it revolves a little bit more around ancient stories and mythology. Both share the same spiritual aspects, but their delivery is so different. Where with Your Name, it revolves around an impact event to which it's connected to, say, a piece of comet that strikes the ground and causes the death of so many. Not only the death of that, but also the disappearance of somewhat evidence to which one of the characters got to have or had at the time. And when you move into Weathering with You, again, completely different, but you do see the creator somewhat carry over. Or in Your Name, you also do get the talk of, say, again, the multiverse again, but it's actually seen in a newspaper, which is actually shown in the story. But in Your Name, it's completely different, where we don't even hear much about the multiverse of Makato Shinkai, but I'm fine with that. I still stick with my ratings in regards to that, even after rewatching it. I'll have to see if I can link in the URLs after this, and maybe even the videos that are connected to those reviews. And I still stand by my review ratings for those. And even after rewatching, I really enjoyed it. And I'd probably give them an 8 to an 8.5 out of 10. And that goes for everything in the story. Now to address the elephant in the room. Being the Makato Shinkai collection, there was actually one Blu-ray DVD that I was expecting, or at least to be on one of the Blu-ray DVDs. And that was for the story of She and Her Cat. And I must admit, the story of She and Her Cat, oh my goodness, it is such an emotional and touching story. It needed to be added to this collection. I mean, it needed to be added to this collection. It is that much of a beautiful film. As short as the film is, it definitely needed to be added to the collection, because in the story of She and Her Cat, we're basically introduced to the main character in this story, which isn't the girl that gets her, but the story actually revolves around the cat, and how this cat, and you get to see the cat in kitten stage, and from kitten stage you get to see it grow into an older cat, so eventually they pass away. And this story was so touching from first to last, and even the beginning of new life at the end of the story, to which you get to see the same character, in other words, the girl at the beginning, finding some kittens at the end, and she chooses one of those kittens to sort of like be the new cat. It was very touching. I loved it from beginning to end. And also having cats of my own, it does sort of make you feel, what is it that they see? What is it that they hear? And it also reminds me of a story that I did once in school. And I don't care if you have a laugh at it or not. But in the story that I did in school, my story actually focused around seeing through the eyes of a mouse. That's as far as I'll go. And the way this story came off, it reminded me of that very story that I had done when I was younger. And it's really nice to sort of like come across stories like this. And though as small as the film may be, it had a lot going for it, and it really deserves to be in this Makato Shinkai collection. It's a real pity that it's not, but seeing it's not, it's actually nice to speak about it on this live stream or on this review or this anime review. So, a big thanks to all those who do happen to come across this review. I really hope you enjoy it from beginning to end as much as I did. Until then, let's keep it colorful and have an awesome day.